let us begin as we always do with our story of the week. Phil, you have an interesting banking experience.
Yes. Now, my story is, well, we normally have kind of funny, quirky stories, and this one isn't. I mean, it's a personal story, and it's, it's a tragic story, really. My mum died last month. She was 91. She had Alzheimer's, and she passed, peacefully and, without any distress. But she was in a home. She was in a home for some years, in fact. We had to sell her house to pay for the home fees.
Right.
That's another issue, whether you should sell a house to pay for home fees. That's a very difficult issue. But anyway, we did sell a house, and the proceeds of that, part of the proceeds, was with Paragon Bank, right, on a 2-year fixed deposit. Now, I became a bit concerned that Mum was, burning through her money more quickly, in fact, because the room was about £3,000 a month. I mean, that's not expensive, actually, but I mean, it does,
it eats away.
It eats your income, doesn't it? And what your savings are. So I rang up Paragon Bank and said, look, I need to access this money a bit earlier. And they said, no, you can't, unless you provide proof of hardship. Now,
the fact that your mother's in a home is not hardship enough.
Well, exactly. It's a very difficult thing to provide, when it's an issue of a carer, an elderly relative who has Alzheimer's. I was absolutely furious, right? So I gave this story to the Sunday Times, and they contacted Paragon Bank, and this went all the way up to the chief executive, who was furious himself with the staff. Yeah. They apologised formally and have changed their practices and have given 250 quid to the Alzheimer's Society.
Oh, fantastic. So good results.
And the Sunday Times may be running a story on it. So that is a result, I think. But it just makes you think, how many more people are in this sort of situation,
getting ripped off
and don't have access to the media, basically.
And you get all these by the book Bettys that just sit there and decide, no, it must be this way, that's what the rule book says, therefore no exceptions.
Exactly.
Yeah, crazy.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad it ended up okay for you.
Well, it did. I mean, for us, and I didn't need the money in the end, obviously, to access earlier because my mother had died and so on. So I told them this, and I don't need the money, but I still think they didn't behave properly, really. I mean, when you're talking about an elderly lady who has died, and that's going to be bad publicity for any organisation, actually, and that's just a very, very bad situation for them.
I've seen this with airlines on bereavement fares, because very often when somebody passes, the only fares you can get are incredibly expensive, but most airlines will reduce it. But the hoops you have to go through, including getting a copy of the death certificate, are ridiculous. Dario, what's up with you, man?
Well, I'm going to bring you guys back to our friends Southern Rail, or my friends particularly down here. I mean, this is just going on and on forever, and it's a sort of government issue, but also people are blaming the trade unions as well. It's just fallen into this complete intractable situation, and the service down here is the worst in the country. It's a disaster. But Southern Railway actually took to Twitter to try and get passengers on side to actually tweet how the strike action was making them feel, which was obviously a sort of way to try and suggest to the unions that, this is affecting the passengers in a specific way and making them look better, essentially. But this kind of backfired. Whenever sort of big companies go onto Twitter and try to elicit the help of the public, it always seems to go wrong. And they faced a barrage of criticism from lots of tweeters who were basically blaming them rather than the union, saying things like, I'll read a couple out. I'd rather be delayed by a strike than your company's inability to hire enough staff. And you are kidding, right? I dislike unions, but I dislike incompetent management more. You provide the service, get on with it. And this is I've got my favourite one. My favourite one here was, I assumed there was an RMT union strike this morning, but oh no, just the standard poor service run by you guys. So an epic Twitter fail, I think, there from Southern Rail. Well done.
You just wonder who is advising these people when some manager comes up with a brilliant brain fart
Yeah.
And it literally is a brain fart.
I know.
to do something like that.
I've got a good idea. Why don't we go on
No. Well, my story is real simple. It has to do with my favorite grocery store. I think you can imagine who that is, Tesco. Apparently, there's this wonderful website out there for 10 ways to have more money as a student. And they came up with this thing that they posted that has gone viral. The Mirror picked it up. You can, if Tesco manages to overcharge you for an item, you get double the difference as part of Tesco's policy. And nobody knows this. So you go in to complain. You should not have to ask for it, but in many instances you do to get your double the difference.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So I figure as a public service, I would pass that along in the hopes of letting folks know that
Double the difference.
Double the difference. So if they charge you, £20 and the item was £10, you'll get £20 back, because the difference between 20 and 10 doubled, and then some are also required to throw in an extra $5. So it's one of those policy things that Tesco clearly doesn't want to have get out. But I really like this Facebook page. Again, it's 10 ways to have more money as a student, because they keep coming up with all these great ways to beat the bastards at their own game.
Great.